Lesson 86 in A Course in Miracles from the Foundation for Inner Peace version. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. It's Lesson 71 and 72 review. Only God's plan for salvation will work. It is senseless for me to search wildly about for salvation. I have seen it in many people and many things, but when I reached for it, it was not there. I was mistaken about where it is. I was mistaken about what it is. I will undertake no more idle seeking. Only God's plan for salvation will work. I will rejoice because His plan can never fail. Only God's plan for salvation will work. These are some suggested forms for applying this idea specifically. So when you're tempted to get upset, instead say something like this: God's plan for salvation will save me from my perception of this. Or you might say, this is no exception in God's plan for my salvation. Let me perceive this only in the light of God's plan for salvation. And then Lesson 72, holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. Holding grievances is an attempt to prove that God's plan for salvation will not work. Yet only His plan will work. By holding grievances, I am therefore excluding my only hope of salvation from my awareness, I would no longer defeat my own best interests in this insane way. I would accept God's plan for salvation and be happy, holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. That's lesson 72 for your afternoon review and contemplation. Here's some specific applications for this idea you might need to use in these forms. First one, I am choosing between misperceptions and salvation as I look on this. Or you might say, if I see grounds for grievances in this, I will not see the grounds for my salvation. Or this calls for salvation, not attack, not attack. Grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. And then our morning review once again, only God's plan for salvation will work. Isn't that nice? Aloha. That's our word for peace today from the 137 Hawaiian Islands. Aloha. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming to join me in this second review of lesson 86, which is review of 71 and 72, which we just sang through in the morning part of the day. Do your first lesson, only God's plan for salvation will work, and then spend 15 minutes contemplating that, and you can read your lesson a time or two during that time. Spend most of the time listening, but you can read it, and if your mind wanders, go back to reading it again until you can keep your mind focused. And then in the latter part of the day, do the second lesson. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. And do the same thing. Think about it throughout the day. Every hour, try to remember it. Maybe a couple times an hour, but keep it close to you through the day. And then, and of course, he gives you some examples on how you can use it if you are feeling like you're going to attack, that you feel like you've been attacked or you feel like you need to attack. Either one's the same. We want to recognize that that's the moment that salvation is knocking at the door, saying, you can see peace instead of this. You can see yourself, your reality, the love that you are, but you've got to exchange grievances for forgiveness. Okay? All right, well, there's your lesson for today, and I'm Forgiveness Willie, teaching forgiveness from the Ozarks. And like I said, we're reading from the original edition, and we're going to be reading out of our text next. Chapter 9, the acceptance of the atonement, Roman numeral 8, grandeur versus grandiosity. Let me give you the definition of both of those. And if you're reading along out of the original edition with me this year, we're a little bit further ahead than where we are in the. We've already read through the what was it called? The Grandeur versus Grandiosity section in the original edition. But today, read chapter 9, Roman numeral 9. The decision to forget. And if you're reading through the New Testament with me, John chapter 18, read. And out of Iyengar Yoga, page 102 and 103, the intense forward bend. And A Course of Love, if you're reading that with me, chapter 27, 1 through 11. It's the chapter called Being. We'll read first half of the chapter. Grandeur. Grandeur, the quality of being magnificent, splendid, awe-inspiring, grand, often associated with impressive size, beauty, and or power. It describes a state of splendor, ability, or lofty majesty that evokes wonder. That's from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So the redwoods, if you stand on there, they're grand. That, to me, is a good definition of grandeur. Okay, but grandiosity is an unrealistic, exaggerated sense of superiority, self-importance, and entitlement, often characterized by believing one is uniquely talented, intelligent, or better than others. And it is a psychological trait frequently associated with narcissism and mania, leads to arrogance, dismissal of others, and inability to recognize flaws or flaws or limitations in oneself. And I found that on Wikipedia. So there's a couple definitions of grandeur versus grandiosity. We don't want grandiosity. Grandeur is of God and only of Him, therefore it is in you. Whenever you become aware of it, however dimly, you abandon the ego automatically, because in the presence of grandeur of God, the meaninglessness of the ego becomes perfectly apparent. When this occurs, even though it does not understand it, the ego believes that its enemy has struck and attempts to offer gifts to induce you to return to its, in quotes, protection. Self-inflation is the only offering it can make. The grandiosity of the ego is its alternative to the grandeur of God. Which will you choose? Paragraph 2, grandiosity is always a cover for despair. It is without hope because it is not real. It is an attempt to counteract your littleness based on the belief that the littleness is real. Without this belief, grandiosity is meaningless, and you could not possibly want it. The essence of grandiosity is competitiveness, because it always involves attack. It is a delusional attempt to outdo but not to undo. We said before that the ego vacillates between suspiciousness and viciousness. It remains suspicious as long as you despair of yourself. It shifts to viciousness when you decide not to tolerate self-abasement and seek relief. Then it offers you the illusion of attack as a solution. 3. The ego does not understand the difference between grandeur and grandiosity, because it sees no difference between miracle impulses and ego-alien beliefs of its own. I told you that the ego is aware of threat to its existence, but makes no distinctions between these two very different kinds of threats. Its profound sense of vulnerability renders it incapable of judgment except in terms of attack. When the ego experiences threat, its only decision is whether to attack now or to withdraw to attack later. If you accept its offer of grandiosity, it will attack immediately. If you do not, it will wait. 4. The ego is immobilized in the presence of God's grandeur because His grandeur establishes your freedom. Even the faintest hint of your reality literally drives the ego from your mind, because you will give up all investment in it. Grandeur is totally without illusions, and because it is real, it is compellingly convincing. Yet the conviction of reality will not remain with you unless you do not allow the ego to attack it. The ego will make every effort to recover and mobilize its energies against your release. It will tell you that you are insane and argue that grandeur cannot be a real part of you because of the littleness in which it believes. Yet your grandeur is not delusional because you did not make it. You made grandiosity and are afraid of it because it is a form of attack. But your grandeur is of God, who created it out of his love. You are grand, and you're one with God. You're grandeur, but you're not grandiose. Paragraph 5. From your grandeur, you can only bless because your grandeur is your abundance. By blessing, you hold it in your mind, protecting it from illusions and keeping yourself in the mind of God. Remember always that you cannot be anywhere except in the mind of God. When you forget this, you will despair and you will attack. 6. The ego depends solely on your willingness to tolerate it. If you're willing to look upon your grandeur, you cannot despair, and therefore you cannot want the ego. Your grandeur is God's answer to the ego because it is true. Littleness and grandeur cannot coexist, nor is it possible for them to alternate. Littleness and grandiosity can and must alternate, since both are untrue and are therefore on the same level of being untrue. Being the level of shift, it is experienced as shifting, and extremes are its essential characteristic. 7. Truth and littleness are denials of each other because grandeur is truth. Truth does not vacillate, it is always true. When grandeur slips away from you, you have replaced it with something you have made. Perhaps it is the belief in littleness, perhaps it is the belief in grandiosity. Yet it must be insane because it is not true. Because we're grand. We're grandeur. Your grandeur will never deceive you, but your illusions always will. Illusions are deceptions. You cannot triumph, but you are exalted, and in your exalted state you seek others like you and rejoice with them. 8. It is easy to distinguish grandeur from grandiosity because love is returned and pride is not. Pride will not produce miracles and will therefore deprive you of the true witnesses to your reality. Truth is not obscured nor hidden, but its obviousness to you lies in the joy you bring to its witnesses who show it to you. They attest to your grandeur, but they cannot attest to pride because pride is not shared. God wants you to behold what he created because it is his joy. 9. Can your grandeur be arrogant when God himself witnesses to it? And what can be real that has no witnesses? What good can come of it? And if no good can come of it, the Holy Spirit cannot use it. What he cannot transform to the will of God does not exist at all. Grandiosity is delusional because it is used to replace your grandeur. Yet what God has created cannot be replaced. God is incomplete without you because his grandeur is total, and you cannot be missing from it. 10. You are altogether irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one else can fill your part in it, and while you leave your part of it empty, your eternal place merely waits for your return. God, through his voice, reminds you of it, and God himself keeps your extensions safe within it. Yet you do not know them until you return to them. You cannot replace the kingdom, and you cannot replace yourself. God, who knows your value, would not have it so, and so it is not so. Your value is in God's mind, and therefore not in yours alone. To accept yourself as God created you cannot be arrogance, because it is the denial of arrogance. To accept your littleness is arrogant, because it means that you believe your evaluation of yourself is truer than God's. Wow. And the last paragraph, 11. Yet if truth is indivisible, your evaluation of yourself must be God's. You did not establish your value, and it needs no defense. Nothing can attack it nor prevail over it. It does not vary, it merely is. Ask the Holy Spirit what it is, and He will tell you, but do not be afraid of His answer, because it comes from God. It is an exalted answer because of its source, but the source is true, and so is its answer. Listen and do not question what you hear, for God does not deceive. He would have you replace the ego's belief in littleness with His own exalted answer to what you are, so that you can cease to question it and know it for what it is. God's own answer to what you are, which is you are exalted, you're great, you're wonderful, you're I just keep thinking of the redwoods. We're like the redwoods. We're like, but that's not arrogant. That's accepting yourself as you are. Enormously beautiful, overflowingly loving, limitlessly powerful. Okay, that's who we are. Only God's plan for salvation will work. If it's in the morning for you, be thinking about that. If it's in the afternoon or the latter part of the day, holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. Okay, yesterday I did this for long, live, and prosper, and Jessica reminded me, this is long, live, and prosper. Lent, the Great Lent for the Roman Western Christians, and then the Eastern Orthodox Christians called the Great Lent, and Navaratri continues for the Hindus. Holidays and observances: celebrate Exchange Day, International Whiskey Day made from corn, Mazia maize, Medical Science Liaison Awareness and Appreciation Day, Scribble Day, Spanish Paella Day, Quirky Country Music Song Titles Day, Viagra Day, and World Theater Day. And let's see. Let's look at the Sunshine Blue Dwarf Blueberry out of Edible Landscaping, which is the Vaccinium coriambossum. I think it's actually a hybrid. It's probably got some other genetics other than just coriambossum, but it may be several coriambossum species that they bred up. I'm not sure. Sunshine Blue Dwarf Blueberry. Sunshine Blue is a compact dwarf southern highbush blueberry, adaptable to different soils and climates from San Diego to Seattle, from Florida to Pennsylvania. Excellent ornamental value, 3 foot tall. Our best plant for keeping in a large wine barrel type pot. Yields are 5 to 10 pounds of fruit per bush and about 80 berries per cup. Excellent fruit and productive. Very low chill, only needs a few days of temperatures below 45 degrees Fahrenheit to begin growing again. It's a good choice for indoor winter gardening or greenhouses. Fall color is red. Native space 4 foot circles, zones 5 through 10. Berries large and sweet. Isn't that neat? Grow it in a wine barrel, bring it in the winter, and just keep making blueberry. But it says you do need to give it a little bit of 45-degree temperature for a while. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the red mulberry, the Marcus rubra. They reach about 60 foot tall, and the black mulberries, much smaller, reaching up to maybe 30 foot. Red mulberry is the Marcus rubra. Black mulberry is the Marcus nigra. They're both listed in the herb book, page 297 and mulberry is 290. Red mulberry is 297. Black mulberry 298. And it said in there, remember the sap and the unripe fruit can cause hallucinations, nervous stimulation, and stomach upset. It's been used for an anthelmintic, which is basically a wormer, specifically for ringworms and for tapeworms, but probably other worms too. It's a wormer. It's an anthelmintic. And then also it's cathartic, which is basically a purgative or a laxative, basically. So I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit more. And they both serve the same purpose, and it's the bark that's used, or the sap. Okay, how are we looking at? Okay, we don't have time to sing what we did when we opened, but we have time to close with a little bit of our song and get you maybe good for your going into one of your meditations. Should we just plan on it for maybe it's a morning meditation? We just do this the morning one and do a short little hit on the evening one. Or we could do vice versa. I'm not sure. Let's just see how it comes to us. We'll hopefully let Great Spirit show me what to do. Only God's plan for salvation will work, holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. Only God's plan for salvation will work. It is senseless for me to search wildly about for salvation. I have seen it in many people and in many things, but when I reached for it, it was not there. I was mistaken about where it is. I was mistaken about what it is. I will undertake no more idle seeking. Only God's plan for salvation will work. And I will rejoice because His plan can never fail. Only God's plan for salvation will work. And if you're tempted, say, God's plan for salvation will save me from my perception of this. Or you might say, this is no exception in God's plan for my salvation. Or let me perceive this only in the light of God's plan for salvation. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. And I don't know if I even told you that it was Friday, March the 27th of 2026 lesson. Aloha. Peace be with you. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. Aloha.